All right, cool. Well, we're a little bit early, but in the interest of first come, first serve, does anybody have anything they wanted to go through today or any questions?
I think Marina was ahead of me, so she's got something. Go for it.
Maybe more of a general question, looking ahead, far ahead, if there are any courses that somebody may have found useful for developer skills.
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually a very timely question that you asked there because my son, who's now 15, has finally demonstrated the level of maturity and I don't know what other word to use except maturity, that I'm bringing him on for a fellowship with my company this summer. And one of the things that he's going to focus on is learning JavaScript essentially from scratch. So what I was trying to do is try to find a course that he can kind of go through at his own pace, a few hours per week, that I can kind of keep track of his progress, but it kind of does all the teaching for him. So let me get the link here and I'll put it in the chat and you can let me know if it is good. Let me see.
So you're recommending to start with JavaScript specifically?
Well, yeah, so that's where in the interest of chewing gum and walking here, let me get the link and then I'll share it with you.
And now I have a follow-up question. How did you bring him up to that level of maturity? Because I have a 17-year-old, and of course I can't keep it to myself. It's like, you need to learn this.
I'm gonna say we're gonna need a longer call if we have to talk about how to bring teenagers up to maturity. I don't think we can cover that during this call. But here, this is the one that I was going to use for him. And let me keep hitting admit. Steve, do you mind if can you do the honors again here if I make you co-presenter? Now I just got to figure out how to get to you without it keep moving here. So make co-host. Okay, there we go. So yeah, let me share my screen here. So share. Okay, so this is the one I found is through freecodecamp.org. So let me just show you this and then I'll explain why I think JavaScript is the right way to go. So this is basically, you start out with like number one, and it basically just shows you how in JavaScript to comment out a line, right? So it basically gives you the explanation, what it is, how you're supposed to do it. And then it says, okay, like now you need to create one of each type. And then once you do it over on the right side, you click run the tests and it'll tell you if you were successful or not, right? So it starts all the way at just how do you create a comment all the way through at the very bottom of this using recursion to create a range of numbers, right? So it starts super simple and then goes to the, a lot more difficult. The reason why I think JavaScript is good, and specifically a course like this, is that it literally starts with like the basic fundamentals of programming, like, what's a variable? How do you make a comment? What is an if statement? What's a loop? And it basically gives you all those examples. So whether, in your future, if you become a developer, whether you're writing JavaScript or not, those fundamentals, generally speaking, are going to be pretty common across all languages, right? So it gives you kind of a good one. JavaScript, at least in my opinion, is a really good one right now because if you're talking about being, a Salesforce administrator and then trying to get into development on Salesforce, when we talk about things like Lightning Web Components, JavaScript, that's where it's at, right? So that's like the primary language that you would use to, to build your client-side logic, for Lightning Web Components. And then, jumping from JavaScript, like the syntax of JavaScript, and again, those loops and all that kind of stuff, to something like Apex, where you're writing server-side logic on Salesforce. Again, it's a natural extension. It's very similar. So that's my opinion. If anybody else wants to throw out anything else, yeah. Any other opinions on JavaScript, if it's the right first language or, other places to get started?
I have a friend who's a developer, not necessarily a Salesforce developer, but he said if you want to go to if he had to do it again, he'll learn Python. Then after that, he will learn JavaScript. If he wants to go
development,
just for development in general.
Oh, I have training in C#, so it's the object-oriented program, and I dipped my toe into JavaScript and CSS and HTML too. I'm just wondering specifically for Salesforce development.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you, though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Forrest, I think that's Python is one of those that it's been on my list for a while. That I need to try to figure it out, but I just haven't had the time. But JavaScript is good. That free code camp, I think, is good to go through the full syntax. And then, Marina, the other thing I would recommend, and I think this might be an obvious statement on a forum like this, but Trailhead, all the developer, trails that they have, specifically around like Apex and Sockwool and things like that. I think those are great too, especially if you have a background already in programming.
Yeah, I'm on the same course too. I think I'm ready for development as myself. So that's a good question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. All right, cool. Any other questions, comments on that before we move on?
Actually, I have a different comment on something different. You mentioned you're bringing your son on as an intern in your company. Recently, I've been trying to get my first Salesforce gig. And although I've got a lot of experience in system administration, I've got zero paid experience in Salesforce. Got my certification. I'm trying to get my app builder cert now, but how in the heck do you land your first job without any paid or volunteer experience? Everyone, it's like a catch-22. Everybody wants experience, but no one will give you the chance. So what are your thoughts?
So what I would suggest, have you looked at any of the programs like Hiring Our Heroes or Merivis?
Yes, I'm a Merivis alumni, actually. I went through one of their cohort 80-25.
Okay. And how about Hiring Our Heroes?
I contacted them and missed out on their fellowship. So they have another one coming up, but yeah, I've looked at them as well.
Yeah, I think those type of programs, I think, and I should have asked you this, are you a veteran, military spouse, something like that?
Veteran.
Okay. Yeah, so Hiring Our Heroes, I think, is probably one of the best because exactly to your point, you can get jobs working for companies that they might not expect you to come to the table with a lot of experience. They know you have a certification and you're just starting from scratch, and that's kind of the whole point of the whole program. So if you can get into one of those cohorts, I would highly recommend that. The other thing, and Sandy, thank you for posting this, is the Talent Alliance. Does anybody have, or maybe Sandy, you can speak to this, but can you kind of explain what Talent Alliance is and how it might help?
Sorry, my cat is walking on the packing papers right now. So as far as I understand, it's basically a bunch, like there's a lot of companies on that list if you go to it, and they are Salesforce partners that have agreed to work with people who have little experience. And basically, if you're a veteran or a newly certified person, they will grant you an immediate interview.
Thank you, Sandy. I have looked into that. I actually applied to a few of the companies. And they also, I think Salesforce DX also had a little virtual fair a while back, which was great. Met a lot of companies, but again, some of those, they're looking for that experience, and that's like my sticking point. So the next, I guess my next option would be to build out an org and show somebody I can do it. That's about it.
That's actually, yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
So the other military trailhead office hours on Wednesday just had, I don't know if you were able to attend with Salesforce Ben, but he mentioned the fact that on his site, which is he considers still in beta, the Salesforce Ben jobs board, he says to use the word apprentice to look for, because and it might work, I don't know if it'll work in others, but on his site at least, if you're looking for an apprenticeship, it means you have no experience, you probably are certified, but so that might actually help you find the right job. So it's something to check out.
Yeah. Two things on that. Steve, I'm definitely going to, when my son comes on board, I'm going to call him my apprentice, and there's all kinds of Star Wars references and like corny things that I can say to him about that. So I'm going to keep that in mind. The other thing too is, Al, you made a good point about, if you can't find experience working for a company, try to build your experience just building something on your own, right? Now, I'm not saying that that's like a surefire way to get a job by demonstrating, like showing somebody something that you built, but it can't hurt, right? And I mentioned this on a few calls where a lot of times when you go through Trailhead and they have you doing examples, you're building like a recruiting app or you're building, some other thing as part of the Trailhead modules. What I like to do is if you have a hands-on org or even sign up for a free developer org, try to build something that is, that you care about, right? And the example I always throw out there is that I have my developer org that I've had for years now, where I keep track of all kinds of stuff like my wine brewing hobby, workouts. I was trying to figure out how to use Chart.js and the D3 visualizations in JavaScript. So I built like COVID outbreak trackers, when it was kind of back in the day when COVID outbreak trackers were still cool. So, building things that, you think are interesting in your org and then highlighting that as part of an interview or in your projects section on LinkedIn, just to show people that, it could put you just at one step above maybe somebody else, right? When they're looking for folks. So.
One more quick thing, if I can throw out there, I don't see Stephen Trimble here today, but Stephen was looking for a job. He's found one since, but he has, if you go on LinkedIn and look him up, he's been developing a beer app in his own Salesforce developer org. And along the way, he keeps posting stuff about how he's making decisions and getting feedback from people. But the great thing I think about that is that it also kind of puts it out there that you are developing something, that you are researching different ways to go about doing things, getting feedback from people. And so it kind of also puts it out there that, that this is something you're interested in, this is something you're active about, and kind of gets your name out there in the space if people are, connected to other Salesforce people. So just a thought.
And it's quantity over quality when you're looking for the first position. Apply. Just don't give up.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Very cool. Any final thoughts there before we jump into another question? Okay, let's open it back up then. Anybody have any other questions that they would like to go through? On any topic? Sure. What do you got, Sandy?
So is there a way to write a formula so that you can use a future date as part of a naming convention? Basically, the current flow has it set up where the intention was that a meeting would be created and named with the date that it will be on as part of the naming convention.
Yeah.
However, because whoever created the initial one used the record that triggered it as that date, so it just keeps labeling it, like with the actual date that the original meeting was, as opposed to the new meeting that's supposed to be created once that one's completed.
Yeah.
But of course, then the other sticking point is that there are some meetings that are weekly and some that are bi-weekly. So once I kind of figured that one out and I'm sitting there going, I'm not sure what way to approach this. So.
Yeah. So just let me say that back to you. So basically these are event records in Salesforce that are being created?
The meeting from the meeting record.
Okay. Now this might be a gap in my Salesforce knowledge, but is there an object in Salesforce called like meeting, or is this a custom object that you guys have created?
I think it's actually, let me double check, but I think it's an actual standard object.
Okay. And in typical Salesforce fashion, we can all learn something new every day. So if there's a meeting object, it went over my head this time. All right. So let me open up my hands-on org and let's just kind of jump in here and we can see. So basically,
nope, I lied. It is a custom object.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So what we can do, we'll kind of distill this down into a simpler thing. We'll take out all the recurrence and all that kind of stuff. And let's just talk about how we might do that in a formula or a flow. So let's take the flow option here. So if we have a new custom object, so I'm going to go to Object Manager. We'll create a new custom object. And I'm going to call this meetings. And we'll make sure it says name here. And then what I'll do is check this box somewhere around here that says launch the new custom tab. So we can get to this once we create it. Save. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we'll create our meeting object. We'll create our tab and not even look, because otherwise I'll be here all day trying to pick the perfect icon. Why can't I see any of my buttons? What in the world? All right, hold on one second. I think I have no idea what I just did. Docked. Okay. Docked Composer. I don't even know what that is. Okay, so let me share. Go back to this. Okay, so back in the setup, I was about to create a new custom tab for my custom object, but somehow I got in the Docked Composer, and I don't even know in Firefox what that even is. So let's just do it for the meeting object. I will click the first one I see, go next. Default on for everybody is fine for our testing. And next. And we'll just include this in every single app that we have. I would not recommend doing this, but again, just for testing, we're just going to throw it on everything so it's not hidden. All right. So now if we go back to our meeting, let's just add a single field that is going to be called meeting date. All right. That's what we'll kind of use as our baseline here. So create a field that's a date field. This will be meeting date. And that's it. That'll be our simple object. Now, what I would like to do is, and maybe even, I'll tell you what, let's add one other field here. Let's do a meeting subject. So let's do a text field. So subject. Yeah, it doesn't look right, but I think that's right. Now let's just make it 80 characters long. Okay, so what we would like to have happen here is that when we create a new record of type meeting, that we update the name of that record to be essentially the subject, and then like the date in parentheses or something like that. If the date changes, it'll automatically update the name of the record. Now, there's definitely going to be some issues that we're going to run into here, but let's just see what happens. I guess we can't do, yeah, okay. So let's just jump right into flow. So if we were going to do some automation based on this, well, first of all, I might say if you had a subject field and you had a meeting date field, I might just suggest having a formula field that concatenates the two together, and then using that as like your reference, or where you're going to display it.
Right. So right now, there's several formulas for various things, but I know that the reason why the date isn't going correct is because the date, the record hasn't been created yet, so it can't use the date on this new record.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not grabbing the date we want it to be. But yeah, there's a formula for the whole, the date and the text, so that it has the slashes or dots or.
Yeah. So just to simplify, just start with the simple one. Let's just do that real quick. So if I wanted to have a formula that was the subject dash date, I could just create a formula field, and it would be the subject plus, I guess, is what we do here for concatenation. No, it's ends. Okay. No. So we would do end. I would put maybe a space dash space and then insert the date, right? So the meeting date. So if we just did this as a formula, what are we doing here? Expected text received date. So let's do, what is it? Date value, I think it is. Let's see. Date. Maybe I can just wrap this in text. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's one thing that as folks are learning Salesforce, it's important to remember that you don't need to really know everything. For example, when I'm creating that formula field, I had no idea you can't just reference date and just add it to a text and it would work, right? So you just kind of figure things out as you go. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's helpful when Salesforce tells you what you did wrong, and then there's other times where it's just like,
yeah,
you did this wrong, and you're like, great.
All right. So if we create this new meeting with a date of the 24th, and I put a subject of meeting with Jim, what I would expect to see is my formula would show meeting with Jim dash and then the date. Okay, so that would be one way to do it. Now, that's not the way you wanted to do it. What you want is that the subject and date is going to update the name of the record. So we can kind of do that in a flow, but
sort of.
Yeah.
So ultimately what it is when it's a recurring meeting, and when one is marked complete, it auto generates the next meeting with that new future date. We've already got one set up where if something about the record is changed, if the date is changed, it updates the name to the new date. So that one already works fine because, you know, it's already got the record there to refer it to. So.
All right, well, let's just see here. So if we did this as a record triggered flow, and we're going to do this on the meeting object. Now let's just do when a record is created or updated, and we want to do it as a fast field update. So it's going to do it in the before context, no requirements. So let's just see.
Those are the things that are relatively new, right? Or just they changed how you access it. Like before it was radio buttons, right?
Yeah, and I used to think it said like before or after. I don't know why they went with this nomenclature. Fast field updates is essentially a before trigger, and the actions and related records is an after trigger. Yeah. So if we did this as the before trigger, if we update triggering record, use the one that triggered the flow. If I just set the name, well, actually here, let's create a formula field first. I just want to see if this works, and then we'll try that recurrence piece. So the API name of this is going to be new name, and the data type is going to be text. And if we did a formula and just said it's going to be the record dot subject and space that space. Oh, don't want to change that. And then the record dot meeting date. Now that the $ record that we see here, in case folks aren't aware of that, whenever you're working on a record triggered flow, $ record is that special variable that represents that whatever record that triggered the flow, right? So if you're creating a meeting record, $ record represents that meeting that you just created, right? So that's what that is. So all I did here was created a formula and missed a concatenation. So I'm just going to add this here. That's going to be our formula. And then all I'm going to do is add a single update triggered record. So we're going to update name, and we're going to set the record name equal to whatever that formula that we just created. So in theory, if we save this now, so update name based on subject and date. And again, no idea if this is going to work. Let's see, it's invalid, incorrect parameter for operator and expected text. Okay, so I made the exact same issue or error that I did before. So we're just going to wrap that in that text to convert the date into a text. And we'll save again. Okay, that looks better. Now we can activate. And let's see what happens here. All right, so because we're doing this as part of by creating the record manually, if we're doing this in code, I think it'd be a lot easier. But if we're creating it manually, what I would expect is no matter what I put here for the name, if I put in a date and a subject of visit Pete, what I expect is when I save this, that it's going to take whatever I put in there as a name, it's going to get rid of that, and it's going to put visit Pete and the date, after a dash. And there you go. So that updates the name. Now, in this case, well, let's just pause there. So Sandy, based on your use case, how are those recurring records being created? This is a custom object, so there's nothing out of the box that has anything to do with recurrence. So how are they being created?
So the first, it's like identifying the record type for the meeting because I've got several different types, and then I basically have added a path to it for one of the other types of records, but this is also where I ended up catching that error in the original flow was with that date naming convention. So it has the decision on whether the status of the meeting is marked as completed and that it is that it is not a non-recurring meeting. So because there's weekly and bi-weekly.
Okay.
So that's how it gets identified and then creates the new record. So I'm also looking at it, and it looks like when it was originally done, it was done as an action and related record. So if I switch it to the fast field, do you think that might?
Yeah, I think it actually would. So if I kind of say that back, how you describe that. So essentially, your custom object you created, you're trying to replicate functionality of like recurring meetings, weekly meetings, that kind of thing. So when you mark the status, if we had a pick list field that we created on this custom object called status, which is like new, in progress, completed, you would have a record triggered flow on that status field that when it gets marked as completed, it creates a new meeting record with the date incremented by 7 days and saves it. So essentially it creates one for in the future. So yes, I think the short answer is if you basically put that logic that we did in our flow, which is to set the name based on whatever date field that you have and whatever subject or whatever it is, to overwrite the name, that should work. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Because, well, like I said, the whole the start conditions actually had it as the after. So if I do the before, it should be able to grab the correct date, you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what is the date? How are you calculating that date?
Let me double check.
Is it like the existing meetings date plus a certain amount, or is it?
Yeah, it's a case formula where if it's a weekly meeting, it's the date of the original meeting plus 7.
Okay.
If it's a bi-weekly, it's the original meeting date plus 14.
Yeah. So that should, whether it's that kind of formula or just a straight up field that you're referencing, either of those should work. If you do it in the before context, update the name, I think you should be fine. So what I would offer is that as you go through that and you give that a whirl, if you run into any issues, let me know and we can try to walk through that specifically, but there's no reason why that shouldn't work.
It won't work because it's apparently they have a scheduled flow on it.
But even that, I don't think should matter because all you're doing is updating the name based on those other values, right?
Well, it won't let me switch it to a fast field update because it's got apparently.
But even that, yeah. So whether it's a fast field update or a after or a scheduled flow, the logic in itself should be the exact same.
Okay.
It's just that you have to, in that flow, as you're going through it for the scheduled flow, you need to have a formula that is calculating the date for that current record that you're looking at that adds 7 or adds 14, whatever it is. And then that's what you're going to use in a formula for the name. So it's going to be like the subject plus the date or whatever it is, right? The logic itself is the same. It's just that you need to be able to calculate the date and then update the value for the name. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, so I'm assuming you have a scheduled flow that is querying for that day any of the recurring events that have been marked as completed, and then it's creating the new ones for the week after, right?
Do you want me to show you?
If it's not like super private information and we're not gonna.
It's just our internal org, and it's nothing private on it other than meeting. The fact that I'm creating a meeting.
Yeah, there's only like 36 people here, and we'll post this to YouTube. So
I understand.
Okay, so you have if you scroll up just a little bit. So this is a record triggered flow. So not scheduled, but you have it in the before context. Okay.
Well, I don't. I tried to, but it wouldn't let me save it. So this is actually the way it was originally set.
Even that should be fine. Okay. So even if you just set that back to the way it was. Now, where do you have the part where it's trying to update the name of the record?
It's on create records. I'm not actually
creating the new internal meeting.
So yeah, for the internal meeting, if the record that triggered it was marked as completed,
yep,
it's supposed to create a new one where it adds all the same people who are attending,
yep,
same meeting cadence, so weekly or bi-weekly. And then this is one of the meeting date formula, and that's the case where it does depending on which meeting cadence it was. Yep. And then of course
the name
it's not working.
Okay, so let's look at that formula that's behind form meeting name new interval. Internal, yeah, sorry. Okay, so this is basically taking the form meeting date name plus the cadence plus meeting. Okay, now what is form meeting date name? Where's that coming from?
So it's really just a copy of the one that was already there, except I changed, except for the fact that they wanted dots instead of slashes. So that was
so let's do this then. If you hit cancel here, if you go back into your create records element that you have there, what are you setting the date for there?
That's the one. So that's the case formula.
Okay, so now just bear with me here for a second. So if you look at
That's not the right one, is it?
Well, if you go into your create records and then just bear with me here. So right now in this create records, you're setting the date to the form next meeting date. That's the date that's in the future. That's the date that you want to show on the name of this record as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So high level, what we need to do is that formula field that you have there for the name, form meeting name, new internal. We need to basically update that formula to use that meeting date, that form meeting next, whatever it is, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so we're basically just going to go right into that new internal and just reference that field, that formula field. So form meeting next meeting date. So instead of referencing the old date, we're going to reference the new one that you're populating in the date field anyway.
What? It worked before.
Yeah, let's go into that. Did you make the same exact issue in your formula that I've made twice today? Just wrap that date in a text.
Oh, the first one.
Yep. So that's the third time that we made that error here. So
maybe we'll eventually catch it.
Yes. Just put a text in the beginning of that, TEXT, and then we should be good. Maybe. Okay. And then yeah, let's see what happens. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Right. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the one that I already. Well, I suppose it wouldn't have mattered. Almost. It didn't add the meeting cadence though, but that's the thing I can figure out.
Yeah, I think it's just that the formula field you have, I don't think included the cadence. I think right now it just had those two formulas that you were referencing. So you just got to add that cadence back in, and then I think you should be good. So if you go back to edit your form and look at the formula field, but the date's correct though, right?
Yeah, the 24th.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at that form meeting name new internal, which is a mouthful. And let's see, meeting cadence. Okay, was the cadence set on that record?
It might not have been because that's a new field I added for that.
Yeah, so I think that might be your issue. So you had it in your formula. I just don't think that record you tested with probably had cadence filled in, but you can confirm that.
I can do it again real quick. I think it's the first one. Ooh.
Yeah, meeting cadence, right top. There you go.
And ta-da. I knew it was simple. My brain was just, overthinking it.
Yeah, so just it was referencing one formula instead of the other. So there you go.
Yeah. And it was funny because I was more or less copying that other one and just changing a couple of the fields. And so, when you expect somebody who has had more experience made that mistake, you're like, oh, how do I fix somebody else's mistake?
Yeah, I feel like I fix other people's mistakes a lot. And usually the other person is me from like a year ago, and I just completely forgot what I was trying to do. So I got to go back and try to fix all my own problems. But yeah, that was kind of a long, go through for that. So we created a flow. We went through and troubleshooted the flow. Does anybody have any questions on what we kind of covered there?
I have just a quick comment that the reason we had problems with making it a before update is because if you do a before update, you can't touch anything else except the record that you're working on. If you touch any other object, it won't save it as a before.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, because I'm also creating a second object for a related list to it. So yeah, that's probably why then.
Yeah, and just to very quickly highlight that. So if I go into my flow builder here and we just pick any object just for a demonstration, if I try to create a flow, created or updated on the opportunity object, you notice here that when we click plus, we got a whole bunch of stuff that we can do. We have assignments, decisions, loops, create records, update records, all that stuff. If we go back in here now and change that to fast field updates, you will notice that when we hit plus, this is much smaller, right? So there's no create records that goes away, and some of the other items go away. So you're very limited to what you can do in the before context. It's really supposed to be you're only updating the record that you started the triggered flow with. Whereas in the after context, you can do a whole bunch of other stuff, go get records, update other things, other objects, things like that. So good point, Steve. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions on that? I saw one in the chat here as I'm now noticing it. Jade asked, Sandy, for this logic, do you take into account holidays? I'm going to guess that would be a nightmare to try to figure out holidays as part of this this flow.
No, however, I do have a decision where if the date is changed on the meeting that's automatically created, that it will update the name to reflect the new date. So
okay.
It's also only going to be put in draft mode because since there are different types of names that they have currently, and there was no way that I could differentiate between a project meeting or a team meeting and stuff like that. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to do this generic convention, and then you guys can go back and edit it if you want more specifics on it. So,
yeah, no. So Jade, to go to your question, making this logic work so that if you were going to have a recurring meeting every Monday, and if the next meeting, so you close this Mondays, and the next meeting that would get created would be for next Monday where it was a holiday, let's just say like Memorial Day or something like that. How would it know that that's a holiday and move it? I have absolutely no idea how we would do that, except to, like, I know there's ways to keep track of holidays like native Salesforce. And then of course you could have a custom table. You can then query that table and see if there's a holiday on that date and then bump it out by one more day. I guess there's a bunch of different ways that you could address that, but I think every one of them would probably be pretty ugly to try to figure that out.
Of course, then the following thing onto that is because it's done by how many days in advance. So whether it automatically bumps it up past Memorial Day, then the following one would automatically be billed for Tuesday. So they'd have to go back and edit that too. So, which is still going to be an issue. Like, again, if they change the meeting date, the following one will be either 7 days or 14 days later.
No.
So
yeah,
no, I've got that extra thing in there to adjust the date.
Yeah, no, what I would suggest in that case, and again, we're throwing out a lot of hypotheticals here. We can dig into any of these if anybody's interested, but what I would recommend there is that if you're going to create a meeting that's weekly recurrence or monthly recurrence, having a field on there that says, well, if it's weekly, like have a dependent pick list that says what day does this occur on, and you set that to Monday. And then if you do have logic in there, if you did have logic in there that somehow figured out if it was a holiday, it's going to bump it out by one day. There's formulas, date formulas that you can do that basically says, the first day of the week, right? So even if it got bumped out, you could figure out what was the Monday prior, like it bumped it out 7 days, but then get the week beginning, which is a Monday. There's lots of things that we could do, hypotheticals, but yeah, I would suggest not doing any of that and just managing it for the few holidays that come up. And
right. And luckily, we're a small enough company and there's only 2 people who really take care of these meetings. So it's not that hard for them to go in and do it manually occasionally.
All right, cool. Well, any other questions on this, or maybe we can open it back up for other questions? Anybody have anything else that they wanted to go through?
Yeah, actually, I have a question. When you were going through the flow, you said the trigger is before an update. Is it like the same as like in code, like when you're doing a trigger, like before update and then the after? That's exactly the same?
Yeah. So if you think about Apex, right, when you're writing a trigger in Apex, you always have those kind of context variables or the context they have to state at the top. So this is a trigger on object X, and it's going to be before insert, before update, after update, like all those kind of things you put in the trigger code. This is exactly the same. So if I were to share my screen again here, if we were to set this as a record is created, fast field updates, that is essentially the equivalent of before insert. If I set it to record is updated, this would be before update. If I set it to both of these, it would be before insert and before update. So yeah, these are all pretty much synonymous with those same contexts that you have in Apex triggers. Yeah. And this would be after, of course, for all those items as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Now the only the only kind of downside is that I can't think of a specific example why you would want to do this, but in Apex, you can absolutely have something that's going to run before insert and after insert. It's going to run the exact same logic. Again, you have to be very careful with that, but you could do that in an Apex trigger, have the same code running before and after insert. With flows, you obviously can't do that. You have to create one that was in the before context when a record is created, and then have a second one that runs in the after context when a record is created. So just there's some little nuance, little differences between the two, but essentially it's the same. Yeah. Great question, though. Any other questions or anything else that anyone would like to go through? Somebody asked, what mic am I using? I am using a Blue Yeti Pro. I hope you're asking because it sounds okay, because I've had issues with these things all the time.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with FormStack. We have it integrated with an org, and I really just need to change some of, tweak the CSS to make the form, like just a part of it, appear differently. Are you able to help me with that?
Yes, I can help with CSS. No, I have no idea what's going on with FormStack. I don't know anything about FormStack, but generally speaking, if they're using CSS and FormStack is going to be the same as CSS that you're going to have on a website or a Lightning Web Component. So if there's a specific thing that you could show that's like, I want to change this from like red to blue, I can absolutely help with that.
All right, let me pull it
Now,
up.
while you're pulling it up, I'll give you one caveat in that if you ask me to write the most complex logic imaginable in Apex, I can do that. I'm your guy for that. When my business partner comes to me and says, hey, that new component you built, can you move that line 3 pixels to the right? Sometimes that takes me longer to do than it is to do the server side code. So CSS is kind of hit or miss with me, but if you want to take a look, I'm more than happy to take a look.
Okay, yeah, it should be a pretty simple one. I just couldn't find this.
And I should point out too, while you're sharing this, that free code camp link that I posted earlier, if you go to the main just freecodecamp.com and you log in there, one of the first courses that they have there is responsive web design. So before it even gets into JavaScript and all that, it has HTML and CSS. So CSS is part of that course as well, that if anybody's interested, you can learn that. I should seriously take that course because CSS is just like, yeah, I'd be happy to add the link. So freecodecamp.com.
Okay,
and I don't,
okay. Oh.
Yep, good.
Oh, is it sharing?
Let me jump back. Yes, it is now.
Okay. So this request box, I just need to make it span further over. I've got my inspector open. The only thing is that the layout of FormStack, I chose for it to be 2 columns.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can cross over into this column or not.
Can you actually show where this form is being built? Like, do you have the actual editor for that form?
Yes, just a second. I'll have to stop sharing.
And for those that aren't familiar, what we were just looking at is essentially a web page over on the left, and then like Chrome developer tools over on the right, where you can right click on anything in a browser and go to inspect, and it'll actually bring up not just like the structure of the page HTML, but then also the CSS there. And it's kind of cool. You can go to like any public website, right click, inspect, and then you can start changing the colors and all kinds of stuff. My kids do that. They call it hacking, but I'm like, it's not hacking, dude. So just stop.
Okay.
So.
Okay, I'm sorry, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Bill, is that the same language that SDocs uses? It looked familiar in terms of designing the way things lay out.
I'm not familiar with SDocs, but if they're using like HTML, and if they're using HTML to style it, it's probably going to be CSS. I'm just not familiar with SDocs. I think I used SDocs a while back.
Yep. Seagal is not an answer to what I just said. The yes sometimes.
Yeah, I build a lot of SDoc templates. Yeah. So sometimes if like the native, like the what they have doesn't work, so I usually go to the source code to kind of like add my own little bit of CSS. Yes.
And one other point about going to the source, I have the exact same issue with Pardot. For whatever reason, creating an email template in Pardot, it's just like a mystery to me. I always have to go to the HTML and start moving stuff around. I just can't, like, adding table columns and things. I don't know. It's just, yeah. Megan, any luck?
Yes. I am getting back to sharing. All right. So this is the box here, but then this is not the layout that shows on the web page. So this is what it looks like on their website.
Okay.
But let me go back to that. And then the CS, do you want me to go to the CSS on this?
Yeah. Is there somewhere you can go for that field? Like,
I think it's, oh, wait. I think it's here.
okay. And then, yeah, if you go down to that field, that reason for request, if you click on that, I'm assuming that somewhere over on the right side, can you just scroll up just a little bit on the page overall? Not like if you put your mouse on the gray section, like the gray stripe, and then just scroll up. Not that gray, the darker gray. Sorry.
Oh, darker.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay, so all right, so you have that field selected. Okay, now what we're looking at over on the right side, these are essentially CSS classes. So you can create a class that says like what the background color is going to be, what the width is going to be, all that kind of stuff. And then you can apply that class to a field on your site or a section of your site and have that style applied there. So what we would basically be looking for is, so group row, max width, 700 pixels. Let's see, border color. Okay. Can you scroll down a little bit more? Let's see, section header, footer. Okay. Do we know for this field, can you go back into the edit form over on the left side there? For that field, if you click into that field, is there some kind of properties or something that you can get into for that particular field?
So there's some limited options here.
Okay, so let's look at this here. So we have default value placeholder required error message, upload file to. Okay, so what I was actually looking for here was like, is there like a class that you apply to that field from here? And it doesn't look like there is. Okay, and then if you collapse that. Okay. Now, I guess the other thing that we can look at here is, so this is this a section of the page? So like if you, can you get into the properties of the section? Okay, so hide section name, section 4. Okay, actually, now you see how that says, what does it actually say, that text there? I can barely read that.
FF section 4, that?
Okay, so FF section 4. Okay, and then if you go back into your CSS now, let's take a look at that. So let's look to see if there's a class called like $, or I'm sorry, hash FF section 4. So it wouldn't be the dots, it's going to be the ones with the hash tag there. Okay. And I guess you have nothing in there for section 4 specifically, right?
No. It's okay. We can take this off to the side another time. I don't want to take up too much time. I thought it would be an easy.
Yeah. Hey, last question I'll ask you, Megan. If on this editor, if you scroll all the way to the top on the left side here, do you have the ability to view as HTML? Like when you go to view form, can you toggle back and forth between like the HTML view and the form builder view?
I don't think I've seen. No form settings.
Okay, so it doesn't look like. Yeah, because to I forget who mentioned this before, but to their point, when they were building forms, I think with SDocs, you have the ability, even in Pardot, where you're building the form through the kind of WYSIWYG or the drag and drop type editor, but you always have that option to go into HTML view where you can modify things directly there. If we had that, then we can apply a class to that field, and we can, create that class over on your CSS and put a width of 100%, and that would take up the full width of the thing. But without that, I'm not really sure how else we'd be able to do it.
There might be some back end and settings that I can go to later. I'll dig around and see.
Okay. Anybody else super familiar with FormStack that might just have the answer to them somehow missing? Okay.
Not personally, but the company that I worked for, we used form stacks for our patient intake forms. Megan, if you're still stuck, maybe tonight, I still have contacts with my previous colleagues. We can pick her brain.
Thank you.
And it sounds like an easy request, right? So you just want to have a field that you want to, instead of being smushed into two columns, you want to take up the full width.
Right.
Of the form. So, I mean, you would think that that's a very common thing that they can handle on their forms.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So, Megan, when you do figure that out, I would love an update just to see how, like you said, it's probably some very simple thing that just went over both of our heads, and that happens. So,
sure.
Okay. Any other questions on this or any other topic that anyone would like to go through? Let's check the chat here. W3 Schools, somebody posted that link there. That is definitely one that I use on a regular basis, especially recently, doing a lot of rebuilding of certain components that were in Visualforce and migrating to Lightning Web Components. There's a lot of JavaScript, not to get too far in the weeds, but there's like old school JavaScript. And then there's like this ES6. They added a lot of functionality in like the, I don't want to call it V6, but ES6 is kind of what they refer to it as. So W3 Schools is really good in that, they give you the examples, and then they have a little cool button that you can click on for any of their examples that takes you into something like JS Fiddle. So it's like a screen that you can have HTML in one block, JavaScript in another, CSS in another, and you can make all the updates you want, and then you can see the results in real time, like in the other kind of block. So W3 Schools is really cool, and they got that link to to that JavaScript stuff. So, okay. Any other questions that anyone would like to go through? Covered a wide range of topics today.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
Like I actually was looking, like I was trying to go through like Trailblazer community to find like dev specific communities where they like build projects and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like the ones that I found, they're not like active, I guess, because probably COVID-19, but like, is there anything like that?
So as far as a community to ask developer related questions, or
more like, to be part of and like kind of continue the learning path?
Yeah. As far as like communities where they're building things and you can kind of get involved, there's a few things like that I'm aware of. Let me just see if I can find a link here. So this is, let's see, open source. Is anybody familiar with open source commons? Have you guys heard that term?
Yeah.
So let me post this here. Yeah, anybody can speak to that or is super familiar with that?
It's just a place where, so there's the nonprofit side uses it a lot for expanding what the .org already has and kind of building upon that for future enhancements, I guess. There was the .org side has some sprints that they do a few times a year that you can participate in to help contribute to those changes.
Yeah, there was another one I was thinking of too, which was for the declarative DLRS. I don't know what it stands for. DLRS. Let's see.
Declarative rollup. Was it lookup rollup summary? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's projects like that they're open source projects that if you're interested in being a part of that, and, helping with the development and, being part of that community, you can sign up for that. I'm just having trouble finding, maybe right here. So here, I'll put this link here, and there you go. So like DLRS is one, like I said, that I know that's an open source project. If you go to the link that's on that site, you can kind of sign up for it. They have a Slack group that's very active. They have a GitHub board with all the open issues. People can volunteer to pick up issues to like actually do coding to fix things. They have, folks that if you're really good at like writing documentation, you can volunteer to update documentation, for the product. So if it's something that you just want to get involved in kind of a public project that has active developers and active people in it, DLRS is a pretty cool one. I'm sure there's other examples like that, but that's just one that I'm aware of that I know is very active. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And just a kind of another answer to your question, one of the main reasons why we actually started this forum, our weekly office hours on Friday, is because a lot of people express that exact same thing where they're trying to get an answer to a question. You can go in the Trailblazer community and kind of put your question out into the void, and then you just kind of sit there and hope that somebody answers and wait. So having a live forum where people can ask questions, that's kind of where this all started. So yeah, 'cause some of those communities are hit or miss. I mean, you get really excited, you find a group, and then you look in there and the last post was like 6 months ago. So, all right, cool. Well, in the last 5 minutes, any other questions that anyone would like to walk through?
No, a big thank you. Office hours have been such a great place in the community. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, final call. Any last questions? All right. Anybody have any exciting plans for Father's Day this weekend?
I get to get on a flight that leaves at 5:40 in the morning to go to Virginia Beach.
Well, there's worse places in the world to go than Virginia Beach. So that's pretty good.
I just came from there. I want to stay home for a little bit. But
yeah,
someone else is paying for it, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah. No, I don't think we're doing much. I think we might just do like a barbecue, maybe go fishing or something. We'll see.
No, we're just hanging tight. It's going to be, I think we've got 10 straight days of 100+ degrees coming here in Dallas. So we're just kind of hunkering down.
Yeah, I could, if we could just go right from spring to fall, I'd be happy. I'm more of a cold weather kind of person. Very cool.
It's one of those things that I can't figure out. When I get in the middle of cold weather, I'm like so miserable and think, oh my God, please just give me the hot weather. And then I get in the middle of the hot weather and go, holy crap, what I would give for cold weather.
Yeah, you got to find a place that's like perpetual fall. That's what you need, where it's just that kind of crisp, cool weather. I just did real quick. I did see one question that came up in the chat about as far as like the office hours and whether or not you have to sign up every week. The answer is no, right? So basically we have the sign up form, and when you put in your contact details there, that adds you to a distribution list. And you probably noticed that you get an email probably every Friday morning from me saying, hey, office hours is today, or hey, office hours is canceled today. So you'll get a notification. I also post the meeting reminders on LinkedIn. So if you're not a part of the Military Trailblazer Office Hours page on LinkedIn, definitely follow that, and we put updates there for all three of our office hours. So we have a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday session. So yeah, the main reason to sign up is just so you get notified if for whatever reason I have to cancel or there's a date change or time change. So sign up one time and then just follow us on LinkedIn so you get the updates. You should be good to go.
Bill, what's the one on Monday? I knew about the Wednesday and Friday, but what's
Yeah, it's a new session, and she was on, and I think she had to drop off. But Jade is going to be running a Monday topic-specific session. So she, for each week, she'll have a different topic, and it's kind of a rapid-fire question type thing where they do a presentation, then you ask questions. So more to follow on that. I think her first session is going to be on Monday, this Monday coming up. So I'll be there. I hope everybody else can join it. And like I said, if you haven't signed up through, through our sign up form, mtofficehours.com. I guess I'm mentioning all these links. I should put them in the chat. mtofficehours.com. So if you follow that link, it takes you right to the sign up page. So if you haven't signed up there, sign up there, and then you get the notifications. And if you haven't done so, if you go to mtofficehours.com, here, let me just pull it up very quickly. So if you go to this, share. So this is the sign up form where you can fill in the form. And then you also notice there's a link here for our page on LinkedIn. So if you click on that, this is the page where, we post the recordings and updates, and, there's a group that we link to here that, for collaboration. So if I go back to one page, you can click on this group on LinkedIn, and, if you want to connect with people, ask follow-up questions, all that kind of stuff, you can do it on this group here. So we were doing a lot of this stuff on the Trailblazer community, like the veterans.force.com, but we do have some folks here that we consider allies. So they don't have access to the veteran community. So that's why we've been doing most of our collaborations through LinkedIn. So, yeah. So any other questions before we part ways here? All right. So I did see, I think it's Jarrell. You have a question. What I'm going to do is put my email address in the chat. And if anybody has any questions that we didn't get to today, or if anybody wants to just, sync up one-on-one, feel free to reach out to me here. I just put the address in there. So, all right. Unfortunately, I have a hard stop. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. Happy Father's Day to those of you that are fathers, and look forward to catching up next week. Thanks all.
Thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Happy Father's
Have
Day.
a great weekend.
Yes.